morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are happy to have with us today Danny Ellis, the CEO and founder of SkySpecs, based here in Ann Arbor. He has some interesting numbers about how he's grown in the last couple of years. Danny is the CEO and co-founder of SkySpecs, a company focused on making wind energy the most affordable form of electricity by automating asset management, operations, and maintenance through the advanced robotics, data analytics, and software platforms. Danny is a two-time graduate of the University of Michigan with a BSE and an MSc in aerospace engineering. He is a Techstar alum, Endeavor entrepreneur, and recipient of the Forbes 30 Under 30 Award in 2016. While Danny has an engineering background, his role at SkySpecs focuses on growth strategy, fundraising, sales, and marketing, team building, acquisitions, and other aspects of business. Danny lives in Ann Arbor with his wife, daughter, and 2 dogs. With that, Danny, I will hand the presentation over to you.
All right, cool. So I have a bunch of slides here to support this presentation, but I can take this in multiple directions, and I love to hear questions. So actually, let me make sure I've got the chat bar open here in front of me. So please post your questions in the chat, interrupt me at any point. I want to make sure to take this discussion in the ways that are going to help you guys the most. We only have 6 attendees here today, so it's a pretty tight group here. I can easily get to all of your questions. But this presentation is built around my accidental journey to be an entrepreneur. And I say it's accidental because when I was in high school and went off to college, I honestly had no idea what entrepreneurship was. It was never in my future vision that I was going to be running a company or even working in business at all. You know, I went off to be an engineer, aerospace engineering, and this kind of just was, you know, one step after the other, and all of a sudden I wake up one morning and I'm an entrepreneur, and it was not the goal at all. So actually, hold on real quick. I need to move my screens around so I can keep staring at the camera while I'm sharing this presentation. All right, are you guys seeing the presentation here, Lori?
Well, I am, yes, definitely.
Okay, cool. Too many monitors over here on my end, so as I move things around, it interrupts it. All right, so anyway, to start, I first wanted to set kind of a baseline on what is an entrepreneur. This is just a quick Google definition. It's someone who organizes or operates a business to take on greater financial risk, you know, high risk, high reward kind of scenarios. But I don't really agree with this. So what I want to give you first is my definition of entrepreneurship. I actually view entrepreneurship as a tool to solve extremely challenging problems that are not currently being solved by other businesses. And I think an entrepreneur is someone who is hyper focused on solving these problems using all resources available to overcome existing challenges. And why do I think this? You know, entrepreneurship when I started was largely viewed as, you know, the high-tech Silicon Valley startup arena. And, you know, everyone was like trying to go be an entrepreneur so they could, you know, be their own boss or, you know, kind of call their own schedule. But that is not at all what attracted me to it. And frankly, I never, like I said, I never set out to be an entrepreneur. So my goal was not to be my own boss. And I promise you I'm not. And I can get into those details in Q&A later. But, you know, for me, it was, yeah, thanks for launching the poll, Lori. For me, it was all about solving really hard problems. And that, I think, is what is unique to entrepreneurship is you can go off on your own with a small team, a little bit of funding, and really try to solve the world's hardest challenges. And you don't have a large corporation over top of you telling you how you can spend your time or money. It's an extremely hard journey to be an entrepreneur, whether you're running a local business or a global business. There are numerous challenges along the way, but it's also extremely rewarding to be able to go after these really hard problems. And so for me, that, you know, I view entrepreneurship as a tool that anyone can use to pursue these hard problems. So quick bit of background on me. As Lori said, this is my short bio. And the thing I want to highlight here is I did not get a business degree. I didn't go to school for business. I took one economics class that I didn't do very well in my freshman year. But it was not my intention to get into business. And I learned along the way, you don't need a business degree to be an entrepreneur. It can definitely help in certain areas, you know, so taking business classes or going after it, I'm not advising against it. But in my experience, anyone can be an entrepreneur with or without formal education. You can go after entrepreneurship, no matter what the background is, and really learn along the way. There are a tremendous number of programs that will teach you everything you need to know, which is exactly how I built up my business acumen. Whether it was starting with Ann Arbor Spark, University of Michigan, or any of the global programs I'm a part of listed here, Techstars, Endeavor, et cetera. There are many ways to go get that training along the way. Diving in deeper here to where did our journey begin? So really what SkySpecs started off as was my senior design project at the University of Michigan. These are some pictures from 2012, but I actually started the student org in 2009. And the entire purpose of what was called the Michigan Autonomous Aerial Vehicles was to build unmanned drones long before the word drone was popular in today's culture, that could fly completely autonomously through an unknown maze of a building to locate a flash drive, pick it up off of a table, drop off a decoy, and exit the building in under 10 minutes. This was an international competition held year over year up in North Dakota. That was the same mission every single year until one university achieved that mission. So we were doing this purely for something fun to work on outside of our classes. My perspective on it was, as a senior in an aerospace engineering program, I didn't feel accomplished enough to call myself an aerospace engineer at graduation because I'd never built anything that actually flew. Everything was textbook stuff. It was taking tests and things like that. And I felt like I needed that experience. So I started this student team, got 15 of my closest friends at the university to join. And that team actually still continues to this day at the university, usually getting 40 to 50 students a year involved. But at the end of our senior year, we had professors, saying, well, you need to go to grad school and keep running this program because it's important for the university. So I ended up staying on for another few years for graduate program. And as I was doing that, getting ready to, leave my graduate studies and go, work in the real world, I had a job offer from SpaceX. And at the same time, the university came to us and said, this is a really cool project. You've done a lot of, really, great things with it. How about you join our incubator called TechArb and try to make this a business? And so literally in a single week in 2012, I had to decide, am I going to jump into this full time, or am I going to go off and work at SpaceX? And for me, the choice was clear. I have absolutely no regrets on it. And so we decided to launch this business to try to use automated drones for large infrastructure inspections. And, 3 of us launched the company in 2012. We brought on a few early employees. We were like 7 people, shortly thereafter, really trying to figure out how are we going to take this technology and make a business out of it. And we didn't even know where to begin. So we started just like looking at all these different industries, and it's like, who could use this automated technology? And for us, I will admit, we were a solution looking for a problem, not my advice on how to start a business. My advice is find a problem to solve and then figure out the solution. But we did go into it backwards a little bit, and ended up finding that the wind industry was an area that really needed our help. And so we actually went out to a wind farm. This is a picture I took with a cell phone at the time. Maybe I actually had a zoom lens on this to see this guy. This was a guy rappelling down a turbine about an hour and a half north of Ann Arbor, just to inspect the blades. And so I took these pictures saying, there's got to be a better way to look at the blades and not have a person rappelling down it. And so that's how we got into the wind industry. It wasn't that, we started off saying, we love wind energy and we need to solve the big problems there. It was more saying like, hey, we've got this drone and this guy could really use this as a better way to do this. We've since evolved tremendously, to focus on bigger problems in the wind industry, but this is really where it all began. And so, our then pitch after that was that renewable energy was going to power the future. And unfortunately, the world is really far away from the amount of investment that needs to go into it. The world really needs to invest $4.5 trillion every year for the next 29 years to be able to hit our renewable energy targets. And this is becoming more and more apparent, every single day as more reports come out. And so once we started launching, drones to take pictures of turbines, we actually expanded our vision to simplify renewable energy asset management. moving in from simple picture taking of turbine blades into a much larger solution around software and decision making on predictive maintenance. But that's kind of fast forwarding to where we are today. How did we actually get there? What was our very first commercial launch? And so kind of going back to the beginning of SkySpecs, we spent probably a good 4 or 5 years building prototypes, having absolutely no revenue, purely focused on fundraising to try to fuel this mission of building automated drones. And after a couple rounds of fundraising, numerous attempts at building an automated drone, we recognized like we needed a much bigger commercial launch to get the industry excited. At the time, our customers were kind of passive. They weren't recognizing the challenges that they actually had on their turbine blades. The wind industry is very young, and they didn't know how bad the health of these assets really were, really because they hadn't ever taken a look. And we were trying to convince them, you need to use this drone to go take pictures. And so after we raised our Series A, I can dive into details on fundraising, what all that means later if you guys are interested. But we raised about $3 million at the end of 2015. So this is 3 full years into our existence. And we decided, we need a commercial launch. We need to get some customer interest. At this point, we had made $0 in revenue in 3 years. It was all just spent on research and development. And so we found this international conference over in Germany, and that was going to be in September of 2016. So in January of 2016, we found this conference. We decided we are going to launch the first live demo of a drone autonomously taking pictures of a turbine blade. And we're going to do it at this conference and invite everybody in the industry to come see it. And this gave our team tremendous motivation and a very firm external deadline that we couldn't move that said, this conference is going to happen, whether we show up or not. So we market it and we don't show up. No one's ever going to buy from us. But if we do show up and we deliver on the demo, then this could be the biggest turning point, in SkySpecs history. And so that's exactly what we did. We spent the next 9 months, very hyper focused on how do we take pictures of a turbine blade and do it in under 10 minutes, completely autonomously with no pre-programming of the drone. And then, kind of use that data to actually prove we can identify defects in a turbine blade. At the time, it was illegal to operate drones commercially without a special exemption. It was even further illegal to do it in Germany, which none of us on the team had even ever been to Germany. And so we had to figure out how do we go over to Germany, get the special exemption, even find a turbine that is close enough to the conference center that our customer is going to be willing to get on a bus and go see this. And surprisingly, we found one turbine. We convinced the owner to let us borrow it for the day. We got a special exemption. And then, the day we get there, it's 25-mile-an-hour winds. And we had never flown. Let me hope there's no audio on this video. That looks good. We had actually never flown in greater than 15-mile-an-hour winds. But since this was our one time to demo it, we said, no, we have to go. The drone was designed for 32-mile-an-hour winds. So we were pretty confident it was going to work. And the very first flight in front of any witnesses, as this video here, the drone performed perfectly. Went up, took pictures of all the blades, 10 minutes later, landed in front of the crowd. And this was, some of the largest wind farm owners and operators in the world represented there. And they all looked at us and they're like, is that it? Are we done? And I said, well, yeah, let's go back to the conference center and we'll show you the data. And so we got everyone back on the bus. It was a very short trip, like less than an hour away from the conference in total. And we brought them back to our booth and showed them the pictures that were taken from this drone and then the damages that were identified and put into a report for them. And about 2 weeks later, we signed a contract with Siemens, which was the largest turbine manufacturer in the world at the time. And a couple months later, we were out, testing with them in the middle of the North Sea, doing offshore inspections. And so this was easily the biggest turning point, in SkySpecs' career. We're 12 people at the time, minimal funding, and now all of a sudden launching commercially with some of the largest owner operators in the world. Skipping on to the next slide here. Let me get out of this video play. Okay. Give me a second here. Jump over to our next video. So then this is another view of what this looks like. So this is a promo video we built a couple of years ago, and this is really showing what the drone is seeing. And so what we've got about 45 of these drones now operating around the world in about 26 countries. And every single day it goes out and an operator like this sets it up and they hit a single button. After that, the drone builds a three-dimensional model of the turbine with a laser scanner and then chooses its own flight path to actually identify where it needs to take pictures. It is lining up those pictures with a three-dimensional model. And then once the data goes back to the cloud, identifying where the defects are. We then have teams of people that review those defects as well to make sure it's being assessed correctly. And then that all goes into our software system for our customers to plan their predictive maintenance. So it's a quick video there. And then this video is showing what this looks like offshore in the middle of the North Sea, taking off from a vessel to go look at these turbines as well. So all of this has come together over about a 10-year journey. And every step of the way, we really had no idea, what kind of challenges we were going to be faced with. And we were, very focused on how do we automate the picture taking. Once we did that, we were focused on how do we automate the decision making. And then that launched us into, building a much larger software platform for complete asset management. So that when a wind farm owner hires us, they don't just get a drone taking pictures. What they get is a complete overview of the health of their asset and an idea of what a return on investment could be if they prioritize certain types of maintenance. And that's really where we're at today, is scaling this out further for total asset management. So it gives you an overview of kind of everything. Today, we've inspected over 90,000 turbines in 26 countries. I could go into numerous stories about the challenges of operating internationally and building a team internationally, which if we've got time here and you guys are interested, I can dive into some of those specifics.
So Danny, why don't at this point in time, I'm going to launch one of the questions that we the poll questions, and it'll give us a better idea of which direction you might want to take it, because this is the one about what parts of entrepreneurship are you most curious about.
Yep.
So we'll give it a minute for attendees to take a look to see what they're into, and then I'll share and then we could, because like you said, where there's a lot of stuff you could talk about. Your journey has been incredible. I'm so happy to see where you're at right now. So it's nice to have a perspective on, you can do this.
Yeah, definitely. And please feel free, type more questions as you have them. I've got a few upcoming slides on kind of my overview. Let's see. Perfect. I love when people say they don't know where to start. That is definitely where I was in the very beginning as well. Let me jump over to my next slide here. So I want to give you guys kind of a view of what it even means to be an entrepreneur. And if you don't know where to start, that's a good place to be. I would not spend time worrying about starting. I would simply spend time thinking about what are the problems that you're passionate about. What do you want to spend your time on? Actually, I'm going to jump to the next slide and I'll jump back to this one. In my view, to be a successful entrepreneur, the number one thing you have to have is passion about solving a problem. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer, if you're in business, if you have no formal training whatsoever. If you have the passion to solve a challenging problem, you can immediately be a successful entrepreneur. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things that come along with that, but that is first and foremost. And if you're not passionate about it, I promise you, I've seen it time and time again. The first or second sign of a really hard challenge, you'll move on to something else. But once you're extremely passionate about it, nothing's going to get in your way. We have run out of money 3 times. So you could say that, we failed as a startup 3 times. Those are way in our past at this point. But, there were multiple points in the time we could have easily wound down the company, gone off, gotten another job, or started a different business in a different area, done something completely different. But once you're like, I cannot go to bed until this problem is solved. Like that is the first thing that you need. The second thing is really a diverse set of skills and experiences. And what I mean about this, it's not to say like if you have a PhD in a hyper-focused area, you can't be a successful entrepreneur. But it really demands kind of building experiences in numerous areas. It's being willing to dive in on some of the technical challenges, and then also go out and start talking to people about sales and marketing and customer experience, and it's a wide variety of capabilities you need to build on, which ties down to one of my lower bullet points here on the desire to continuously learn. Entrepreneurship is something, it's almost like you're in school forever, because every step of the way you have to learn something new. When we got into the wind industry, I knew nothing about wind, right? It was not where my experience was at all. Now it's probably the only thing I know how to talk about anymore. But in the beginning, it was going to conferences, it was reading papers, it was calling people, it was, we have a different Q&A box here. Okay, perfect. I will open up the chat and the Q&A box. It's a wide variety of experiences that really allow you to become a good entrepreneur. One of my philosophies on being a CEO is that I try to hire people smarter than me and get out of their way. So my goal is not to be an expert in any one area of the business. It's to have a whole bunch of people on the team that are experts in their various areas. And I want to know just enough about each area to be able to intelligently talk about it and build strategy around it. So I'm very broad and shallow on my skill set. I was never the best engineer out there. I was definitely a 3.0 student, not a 4.0 student in college. But that allowed me to have kind of a vast amount of experiences, when getting into entrepreneurship. The other thing is, it is absolutely a roller coaster. So you have to have the willingness to take many risks and persevere through the high highs and the low lows. They will always come. We literally could have one day where it's like we lost the biggest contract, 6 drones crashed. We have no idea where we're going to get money from, to the next day signing a multi-million-dollar contract and being like, wow, nothing can stop us. And literally that fast. Day by day, the roller coaster can go up and down. But at the same time, you never get that similar experience anywhere else. So I definitely recommend it as a career path, but like to let people know where those experiences can take you as well, so that you're prepared for them. Now let me look at the Q&A here real quick. All right, so to answer the first question here, of the 12 people in the beginning, it was about 9 of us were engineers. I think, or maybe it was like 8 or 9. The first non-engineer we hired, who's still our senior vice president of business development today, we got fresh out of business school, and we said to him, we're working in the wind industry. This is our target. We have no idea what we're doing. Go figure it out. And he almost single-handedly built up the market for wind turbine blade inspections. And a lot of it was just calling people, going to conferences, asking a lot of questions. The first conference we ever went to was in Chicago in 2013. It was after we won a $50,000 business competition through the Ross Business School of Michigan. So we took first place in what was called the Clean Energy Venture Challenge. And it was entirely on a concept of inspecting turbines, but we, at this point, had never even visited a wind farm. And so we took about $10,000 of that winnings and went off and got a tiny little booth at a conference in Chicago. And all we had was a picture of a CAD model of a drone. We didn't even have a real drone at the time at the conference. We stood by this little cocktail table at our booth and just was hoping someone would come by and talk to us. We had no idea what we were doing. And this guy comes walking by and he looks at the picture and he's like, oh, are you building drones to inspect blades? And we're like, yeah, we are. And he's like, oh, I've been thinking about doing this. And we asked him, like, who do you work for? And he ended up working for the largest independent inspector of turbine blades in the country. It's a company called Upwind Solutions. 3 months later, we partnered with them. They took us out onto wind farms. There's actually a picture of the guy rappelling down the blades. It was the trip they took us on. And we started, working, hand in hand with them to build up this solution. Well, then they got purchased. All of our points of contact got fired. As it turns out, that guy's name was Justin, that walked past that booth. He works at SkySpecs today. He's worked with us for many years at this point. So after he lost his job when they were acquired, we brought him over here. But we literally just stood there and started talking to people and asking lots of questions about, what were they trying to solve in the wind industry. So it's not having a fear to really jump in and figure it out. Managing global inspections. This is a challenge that we did not realize how hard it was going to be when we got in. We were like, oh yeah, we'll just go to another country and launch it there. One of our employees that has since moved on to other things now, for about 6 years, he was running our global inspection operations. And he built up a network of pilots and operators and partners. We had to get clearances in multiple aviation jurisdictions, and then also figure out how to stand up businesses so we could actually invoice people in different countries. So all of that came together slowly over time. It wasn't kind of an overnight thing. It was like, oh, hey, we have an opportunity to work in Denmark. Let's go there first. Then we can work in the UK. Let's go there next. And one at a time, we started adding countries to our networks and figuring out how to ship equipment around the world. Now it kind of just runs. We have a team of 30 or 40 people on the operations team now that run that. But it was definitely a lot of traveling to those countries and figuring it out ourselves. And the very first time, hold on, I need a drink of water here. Hold on. The very first time we went and did the offshore, it was me on the boat. And so in the early days, it was the founders of the company going out there and doing these things. And then eventually we were able to hire people to go do them for us. But yeah, it was a lot of traveling to go figure that out. The other question here, the inspections are done by us. So we actually manage the equipment all around the world, except in Japan. We have a partner in Japan that works for us. That we have lots of contracted pilots. So they're not all full-time employees. Many of them, do other things throughout the year, and then they work for us when contracts come up. One of them actually, out of our Spanish partner, they're cinematographers as their primary job. They filmed one of the James Bond movies and one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. That was what they did as their main job. But then in between filming sessions, they have a lot of downtime. And so we've contracted them to go out and use our equipment. So even though the drone's completely autonomous, someone has to be there to change the battery, turn it on and off, and take over if anything goes wrong. So we still do have someone on the ground, every one of those inspections. Most prominent challenges. So the challenges are endless, but I will say, as the founder of the company, the biggest challenge that I am always faced with is making sure that the team has the right resources. So my whole purpose here is make sure there's funding, make sure that the right people are getting hired, and make sure that any roadblock is in their way is knocked down, whether that's regulatory, customer roadblocks, interpersonal roadblocks, either in the team or with our contractors, or whatever the case may be. It's making sure that the team has the right resources and abilities to go solve the problems. So those challenges, like I said before, we ran out of money 3 times. Trying to figure out how to find more money and bring on more investors, that's always a major challenge. But we've also run into extremely technical challenges. So as I kind of alluded to in an earlier story, the middle of 2018, we owned 8 drones at the time. And I think it was, it might have been, it's 2018. I'm trying to get my timeline here. We owned 8 drones. And in a span of 2 weeks, 6 of them catastrophically crashed into the ground. And we could not figure out why they kept crashing. Well, as it turns out, we had recently ordered some new parts for the drones. This is from a third-party supplier. And the motor mounts that hold the motor to the arms were made an order of magnitude too thin. So they were supposed to be 0.1 inches thick or something like that, and they were 0.01 inches thick. And the motors were literally shearing off mid-flight, and then the drone crashed to the ground. And so we went from having 8 drones to 2 in the middle of July, which is our peak season, and had to figure out how are we going to source enough equipment to continue with the contracts that we have, convince the customers that they're not going to keep crashing, figure out what the problem is, fix the problem, So that was a major issue that was causing many sleepless nights and all-nighters being pulled by our team to figure that out. So we were still a very small team then as well. So yeah, the biggest challenges, they range. It depends on the year, it depends on the customer we're working with, or just things like that. But it is endless. But I would say, as an entrepreneur, biggest challenge is making sure you got the right resources and the right runway to solve problems and hit the industry at the right time. Yeah, working with large contractors, large customers. Another question, or another answer here, it's just highly dependent. In the very beginning, like, our very first customer was Siemens, like one of the largest companies in the world. Thankfully, we had a good legal team, and spent a lot of time reviewing the contracts and negotiating certain points that were going to help us in the future. But a lot of it is also trial and error. So we, one of the biggest failures we ever had, I'll tell you this story. The very first offshore job we ever did was off the coast of Denmark. It was the same farm I visited, shortly after the story in Germany that I told. And we signed a contract with Siemens to inspect 111 turbines. And the way we built it, there was this clause in there that if Siemens caused any downtime, they owed us money. And we thought we had negotiated this correctly. And so we went out, we did the job. We were working with a third-party operator that we found based in Norway. The job was supposed to take like 10 days. And for whatever reason, it was like taking like 40 days. And we couldn't figure out why. And the contractor kept telling us, like, oh, bad weather, which we had a bad weather clause in there as well. Bad weather, or the boat operators had other things to do, so they were causing delays. And we were tracking how many hours of delays they were causing and expecting to be able to build this. But we didn't really negotiate it correctly, as it turns out. So at the end of the job, we ended up losing over $100,000 on the job. At this point in our existence, this is 2017, our first year of commercialization, we only had like $500,000 left in the bank. So this is like a fifth of our money lost on a job. Like, we didn't make any money. And so it was a horrible position to be in. Had a board meeting shortly thereafter, and I was expecting to get fired in this board meeting, because they were like, you can't lose $100,000 when you only have $500,000 on a large job like that. And thankfully, our investors had been through these kind of experiences with other companies before, and they were like, all right, well, let's just figure out, what do we have to do to fix it? Like, how do we move forward in the future and not have these challenges? So it forced us to completely change how we tracked downtime with customers, and made them sign off on downtime every day that downtime was created before we went out the next day. And this completely fixed these contractual challenges we had with these large customers, these large customers that have much bigger legal teams than we do and can fight against it. And in the future, we are able to turn those offshore jobs into very profitable jobs for us. But we've went on to make millions of dollars in offshore work, and so that 100,000 loss kind of is lost in the noise now. But at the time, it was almost detrimental to the company, due to this basically lack of negotiating power with a large customer. Do you still take a lot of risks now? Definitely. I mean, we're probably at a turning point in our own existence where we're taking some of the biggest risks we've ever taken. Earlier this year, we acquired 2 companies in Europe during a pandemic, virtually, without being able to even travel to Europe to meet them. So one of these companies I'd known for 2.5 years, so I knew them pretty well. But the other company I met on a cold email in January, and we'd acquired their entire company by April. And for us, the risk that we're taking is we are leading experts in blade inspections in the wind industry. But we saw an opportunity to scale this up into running the entire wind farm. So one of the companies we acquired actually does the predictive maintenance on the drivetrain of the turbine. So it's the gearbox and everything that's actually generating the power. And the other company we acquired has a software tool for financial asset management. So they understand where all the dollars are flowing in and out of the farm. By bringing both of those onto our platform, we now have a full view of what it takes to run a whole wind farm. And then we can help prioritize certain repairs and where money is going in that farm. But it's still a huge risk. Like, we took a risk on bringing in 2 international companies, integrating them to our team, spending money on their growth, kind of changing the trajectory of our business. And if we're wrong, we could fail the company faster than if we had not done it. But if we're right, which we still believe we're right, this has only happened 120 days ago or so, but if we're right, we are then targeting a much larger problem in a much larger market. And that could, be the critical point for our success in the future. So you're always looking at the, how the market is changing. What are competitors doing? What are your customers doing? What are their hardest challenges that you need to step up and solve? And if you stay, in your one single product, at some point that becomes stale. Either others have done it better, or there's price pressure on it, or customers, if you're not solving the entire problem for the customers, they move on to someone who is. So you have to constantly be evolving and looking at, what's down the road. What do you need to change to stay current and relevant in that industry? And you have to take big risks. I would argue that buying two companies at the same time is the largest risk we've ever taken, even though it didn't cause us to, run out of money the way we have in the past. So yeah, you're constantly taking risks. The other risks, common risks as an entrepreneur, depends on the stage. In the early days, your biggest risk is you're probably not getting paid. So you could easily graduate school, go off and get a salary job somewhere and be very comfortable with that salary. In the beginning days, we were not getting paid. There was no money to pay us. And so my perspective on it at the time was, well, I'm already living like a poor college kid. Let's just keep living like a poor college kid for a while. And knowing I could, go off and probably, beg for the job at SpaceX back if I needed to. And at the time, it was not a big deal. I would say, later in life, if you've got a family to support, it's probably a very different decision. But that is definitely the biggest risk in early days is opportunity cost. You could go get paid somewhere else, or you could, go off on your own and pursue this in the early days. Now, you should always be working towards how do you get money into the company fast. So you can pay yourself and you can hire good talent and pay employees and things like that. But that is definitely an early stage risk. A later stage risk as an entrepreneur, it's highly dependent on the stage of the journey. I'd say right now, we are well past the biggest risks that kill startups in the early days. But like I said, it doesn't mean we're beyond the risks that could cause our business to start to slow down or fail completely. There's always that risk on the table. But I think us as founders have built up a tremendous amount of career experience along the way. So I'm not personally worried that the company ends tomorrow and I can't get a job the next day. So you still build up a lot of that experience along the way that is immensely valuable. Seasonality. Oh yeah, this is a big question that our investors give us all the time. It's very seasonal. We definitely work, the most in May, June, and July. So those are typically profitable months and things are looking really good then. We do very little in December, January, and February. We're working to balance it out by working in Australia, a lot of work in Texas still, done a little bit of work in Brazil. So the seasonality can be balanced that way, but also launching into other software products that don't have seasonality to kind of smooth that out. Yeah, Yash, to your other question here, the CEO is definitely not the end all be all. So as I said in the very beginning, I am not my own boss. My boss is our investors and our board. So I report to the board, I'm on the board, and I report to the board. They are largely driving, what kind of funding we have access to and what we're able to go do with that funding. I still have a lot of the day-to-day decision making. So they don't step in and say, you can't hire this person or you can't go after, this product. But the overall budget and strategy and how things are pursued, they definitely have an influence on. And so my role as a board member is to be the interface between the company and the investors. If you can start a company and not have investors on a board, that's fantastic. But you have to balance how fast do you want to grow or need to grow to stay relevant versus how much control and ownership do you want to have in the business. There is definitely a balance there. It depends on the industry, depends on the technology. If you are not a tech heavy business, then you can probably get away with less, fewer investors. But it's just highly dependent. I mean, you look at look at Tesla, they have to raise hundreds of millions to even be relevant, if not billions at this point. So it's just different depending on what you're trying to build. But, it is something that has to be considered is when you're trying to be an entrepreneur, any investor you bring on is like a marriage. It's harder to get out of than a marriage. you're pretty much tied at the hip until the end of the company if they've invested in you. And you need to have a very strong relationship with them. So that is assessing investors and board members is a critical component of being a CEO and something you don't want to mess up. That's for sure. Were there moments that we doubted the success? Yes, absolutely. But I mean, there were definitely points in time where it's like, customers aren't buying, or we lose a customer, or a drone crashes, or something in the very, very early days. We hadn't really hit our stride yet, that we thought like one misstep was going to cause the failure of the company. These days, I think we're, like I said, we're largely past those early scares that we thought were going to cause failure. But in the moment, I don't think we felt like it was going to was that critical to failure. Like looking back, it's like, wow, we were very close to failing. But that's with a very different perspective than we had at the moment. In the moment, it was just determination to say, all right, we didn't land that contract, we didn't land an investor. I've probably gotten 500 no's from investors versus the 20 yeses that I've got, if not more no's. It's hard to keep track of. So most of the time, it's a no on investment. Even in the early days, it's a no on contracts from customers. So there were a lot of moments in time we probably should have failed, and we're just too determined and pushed through it. Maybe the biggest moment in time was before we found the wind industry. In the very first year, like 8 months in, we had put kind of all of our eggs in one basket and applying to a grant. And this grant was only worth $150,000. It was not that much, but at the time we had $0. And we spent 3 months writing this grant. We were pretty sure we were going to win it. And then we found out we weren't going to win it, and we still had no money. We were days away from graduation of our master's degrees. And we're like, well, I guess this is it. We got to go get real jobs, and we got to go figure something else out. And that's when we found the first business competition that we ended up winning. So I would not recommend building a business off of business competitions. Like it's not a high margin for success there. But we were lucky in the early days. One of the times we ran out of money is when we won about a week before we won the Accelerate Michigan business competition, which was a $500,000 first place prize. And so like there's a lot of luck involved there. We were at the right place, right time with the right pitch to win first place there. But had we not, we might have been winding down the business right then. So it was, there definitely some points in time where like, man, that was a lot closer than we thought in the moment. Yeah, any backup plans? No, not really. I mean, like I said, I was pretty confident I could go get a job if I needed to. But for us, the whole founding team, I mean, the original 5 members of SkySpecs are all still on the team today. We were very determined to make this work one way or the other, and not get lured off to other job opportunities along the way. Even when it was very challenging in the early days. So didn't really have any backup plans. I don't think we really needed them at the time because we weren't really struggling personally. But yeah, I think it's probably a good idea to have backup plans. We were just way too focused at the time. The difference between being relevant and applicable. Yeah, that's a good question. It's dependent on the industry, but I would say the biggest mistake we made in the early days, as I mentioned already, is we were a solution looking for a problem. And the challenge there is you build a lot of cool technology and you're like, this is awesome. The world needs this. But if the world doesn't realize they need it and no one's willing to pay for it, it doesn't matter. Like all that matters is what the customer is willing to pay for. We spent a lot of time building things that had no clear market fit. There was one moment in time we had to come together and literally throw away innovations we've been working on. One was an airframe I was building. One was a flight controller one of our co-founders was building. And we said, like, look, none of this stuff matters. All that matters is, can we take better pictures of a wind turbine? And so what we did is we literally scrapped what we'd built and we went and bought an off-the-shelf drone and focused solely on the programming of that drone until we could figure out how to automate it. And that was, that turning point was another probably, near miss, where had we not made that decision, we would have taken it off a cliff. We would have failed because no one was willing to buy the drone that we were building by hand. And so once we focused on the end user's problem, that really changed our path to success. So The difference is, you're only going to be relevant if the customer is willing to pay you. If they're not willing to pay you, it doesn't matter how cool technology is, it won't have a future. And staying relevant into the future, man, lots of strategy conversations, lots of reassessing, the industry as a whole and where it's headed. This is why we, purchased two companies, is we realized the industry was moving on to this kind of total asset management play, and that the blades, which are only 40% of the operating cost of a turbine, were not going to be purchased independently. And at some point in the future, everything we've been selling to date has been just for blades. At some point in the future, it's not going to cut it for the customers anymore. And this is through lots of customer conversations and just kind of assessing where the industry is headed, watching, other companies that are grouping up or being acquired, trying to figure out where they're building solutions as well. But I mean, that's a tough question always. I mean, and you can look at a lot of historical evidence of this where people failed. I think the most famous one is Kodak, right? They had the first patent on the digital camera, and they were like, well, that's going to hurt our sales in film, so don't build it. And that was clearly wrong. So it's like, it's something as a CEO or an entrepreneur in general, you always have to be thinking about what's going to happen 5 years down the road, and how do you position yourself today for that? That's, probably the $1 billion question always is trying to figure that out. How did my master's degree help me? Directly, probably not much, but I would say that all of my education, at the University of Michigan, which was focused largely around what I was building in drones, was more about problem solving and team building. I got a lot of team building experience through my master's degree, and figuring out how to work on a larger team in any industry is really a key to success. Like, no major problem in the world is ever going to be solved by a single person. There's always going to be teams of people behind it. So that was probably the largest thing I learned from my master's degree. It also allowed me to build tremendous connections. A lot of our early employees were people I met either through that degree or connected to it. So without that, I would never have had that access. Two of my earliest employees were actually students in the class that I was teaching as a grad student. They were freshmen in a class I taught. One of them, joined, as a partner to the business, and the other is the lead software architect on all of our autonomous systems. They are critical members of the team, have been from the very beginning. So, things like that were definitely a direct result of going to get my master's degree. The actual coursework, taught problem solving, but I did not personally use the coursework. Now, my co-founders have. My co-founders on the technical side of the business. So, one of them, the lead software architect, he would literally go and sit in classes he wasn't even a part of, learn about some, advanced nonlinear flight control, capability, and come back to our office and program it into the drone. So, he definitely extracted a lot from, directly from the master's degree, but me, definitely less so. Would we consider being a publicly traded company? Yes, but there's a much larger question around that. When you take investment from venture capitalists, if you take that path, you have to recognize that the business that they are investing in is their product. And so as venture capitalists, they have investors called limited partners, LPs, in them. They have a duty to go invest in successful businesses and return a financial investment to those investors. And so they have to sell your business at some point in the future. That doesn't mean that the entrepreneurs or the founders are gone. Doesn't mean that you even lose control of the business, but they need an exit of some form. That exit can come selling it to somebody else, which can be like a large private equity firm, or it could be taking it public. So that has to happen, and you just have to recognize that is a path. If you don't want to do that, don't take investment in the beginning. So, and I could dive into many different avenues on that, but and there's other kinds of investing as well. It's not venture capital. But so yeah, SkySpecs is heavily venture backed. We've raised $40 million to date, probably some more money in our future. And the public markets, while I am not terribly thrilled about the idea at this moment in time, I don't think the timing is right. The public markets are always a path for a venture backed business. So it always has to be kind of in the back of your mind that might be where you end up. You could also get acquired by a public company, so that could be a kind of a hybrid approach as well. So So yeah, I mean, it's a consideration. It's not something that is currently on my radar as a goal of mine in the near term. Oh man, interpersonal issues with fellow members of your team. I could go on forever about this. One of the most critical things is being able to work with the people around you. In the early days, one of the biggest challenges we ever had is that it was hard to tell whose effort was going to lead to what success and at what time. And we were all kind of all hands on deck on every problem. So that was like lots of very long nights in the office. And it got to this point where some people wanted to take a bit of time off and others were still working hard. And there was this like discrepancy of like, oh, if you're not in the office and you're not working, some other people are working harder than others, even though it was like, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks sometimes. And we were definitely, nearing a point of burnout without realizing it. And that definitely caused interpersonal relationships of like who's willing to burn out faster or harder to solve a problem and who isn't. And we recognized about 2 years in, like this was not sustainable. We had to take time off. Like we were working right through every single weekend. There was no time for anything personal, and that wasn't sustainable at all. And so we actually kind of got forced into this. We got into a Techstars program that was in New York City. And as it turns out, the Techstars office wasn't open on weekends. And so we were not allowed to even go in on weekends when we were there for 4 months. And that forced us to kind of reconsider how we were achieving our goals. And we started taking, working few hours, more normal hours, not working weekends, and just divvying up roles and kind of setting metrics for success a little bit better. And that team building helped out tremendously. Otherwise, there would have been, much larger personal issues and people leaving the team, sooner. I'd say we were definitely on the brink of that in the early days. But then, I mean, as you grow, we're 142 people now. So we have other personal issues that just happen, with any employees, whether it's someone that needs to be let go or someone looking for a promotion or, what have you. So we have an entire people and culture team. I don't even know how many people are on the team now, a handful, 5 or 6 people. That's an entire focus of the company. So one of the leader of that, the vice president of people and culture, she is on the leadership team, with everybody else. And it's all about how do we help empower our people to do their best. So how do we hire the right people, give them the right, benefits, give them the right, tools at work, listen to their concerns about their work environment and how they work best together. And that is a strategic focus for us. And if you don't focus on your people, you're just going to be a revolving door of talent in and out the door. And that's never a sustainable position to be in for any company. So it's changed. It's definitely very different, kind of what the challenges are, now versus now. But it's something that can't be ignored either. I think the interacting with people as people, recognizing them for their skills and their challenges and things like that is something that's very critical to the success of a business, from a leadership perspective. Lori, I recognize we only got about 5 minutes here, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Go on for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, this whole notion of being an entrepreneur has so many different aspects to it, so many challenges, but so much excitement. So I would like you to maybe take a minute before we close to tell the participants how important it is to have mentors along the way, that you're not doing it all by yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, it is the most important thing as a founder. I was very fortunate. I've got multiple co-founders of our business. So I was able to lean on them in the early days as well. And we didn't know everything we were doing, not even close. So we got mentors from the University of Michigan to start. Then we had mentors in Spark, then Techstars, then a program called Endeavor, and numerous other, mentors along the way. I probably have a list of 4 dozen or so mentors that I interact with on a regular basis, at least a dozen that I call definitely monthly, some even weekly, that I'm talking to all the time. That coaching is critical. And then I'm also a mentor for many up and coming entrepreneurs now, both through those programs and independently. So that is a support network you absolutely need. Being a founder is a very lonely position. It's, you can't talk about all the problems you have with your employees or your team members. You have to have external parties to bounce ideas off of, or to talk about challenges and figure out solutions. So no one is running on this on their own ever. It's like that I've heard so many times, well, what about people like, Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or whatever? It's like they also have tremendous amount of mentors behind them in their early days as well, and a huge team of experts, behind them. So it's not like a Tony Stark where it's one entrepreneur by himself building everything. Like that's not reality. You need to lean on people, for mentorship along the way.
Yes, it's not a go it alone kind of attitude when you're having a startup company, especially in the early days, right?
Yeah, definitely not. And I would not found a company on my own either. I would always have a co-founder.
Well, that's great advice, Danny. I really, I loved hearing where you guys are since I knew you when you were in the beginning of this endeavor. So for the participants, I hope you learned a lot. There was a lot of great information that Danny shared. Thank you very much, Danny.
Absolutely.
For the participants, as soon as we close out this presentation, there'll be a short survey that we would appreciate if you could actually take it so we can get feedback. The other great thing is we had been recording this, so we will be on the SummerWorks YouTube channel probably within the next week. So with that being said, thank you guys for participating. Danny, thank you actually for presenting and taking the time to share your endeavors with us. And I hope everybody has a great rest of the week.
Yeah, I'm answering this question real quick. Sorry, I just sent it to you, Laura, but now I sent it to everyone. If anyone wants to contact me, I just gave you my email in the chat. So feel free to shoot me questions along the way, and good luck on your journeys.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.